Okay, so as long as you have a web browser installed and you have some kind of text editor, you're ready to go and start being a front-end web developer and learning what you need to become a front-end web developer. Now I'm using a text editor called Sublime Text. Now this is different from things like perhaps Notepad that you have with Windows or TextEdit, I think it is, with OS X, because what this will do, it will specifically detect the kind of code that you're writing. You'll have things like syntax highlighting, and all syntaxes is just the code that makes up the language that you're writing. And we'll also have the benefit of the text editor indenting things for us. And it just generally makes for a lot more pleasant experience. And once you become better at web development, you'll be able to use the tools within the text editor to speed up your web development and do other things. So for example, Sublime Text supports lots of plugins. Okay, so we're going to save a file out. We're just going to write a little bit of text in here to start with, and then we're going to save this file out. And that's going to be our first file. Then we're going to add some HTML to it. So this file as it stands, I'm just going to write test. Or in fact, let's make it a little bit more friendly. Let's say hello. And I'm going to save this inside my documents folder as we'll save it as index.html. Now, the reason I'm saving it as index.html is typically when you have a web server like Apache or Nginx, which are two popular web servers, they will automatically look for a file called index.html or index.php if you're working and you're writing PHP code, which is a server-side language. So we call it index to say when you land on a forward slash of that page, this is what it's going to look for basically. We're not going to dive too much into sort of server technology, but it's a good idea to always call your homepage index.html, unless you're working with a more advanced backend language, in which case you don't need to. But if this is just your personal website, index is where your user will land when they go on your domain. So let's save this file out. That's now saved. I've got my Finder window open here with this open. So when I double click on that, you can see that actually opens the file that I have requested. You can browse all files just by doing that if you wanted to. So I've got index.html there, and there is our text. Now we haven't technically created an HTML file yet. If I just inspect element on the page and hit network, you can see that when I refresh, this has a type of text HTML by default because it's an HTML file, but we don't actually have any HTML code in here just yet, or any markup in here just yet. So let's create a very basic element just so we can test that this works, and pretty much then you've written your first HTML. So I'm going to create p tag, which is a paragraph tag. So this typically exists to serve as a paragraph of text. That's pretty much what it should be used for. It's probably a good idea to point out at this point that when you are building an HTML document, the elements that you use are extremely important because they all have their own intended purpose. Some are a little bit hazy in terms of not quite sure what they should be used for, and there's some debate among the web development community. But paragraph, or the p tag, is generally for a paragraph of text. So you can see here that we've started this with a p tag and we've ended this here. This basically means end this element. Now there are some elements that don't end. For example, BR, you wouldn't do BR, and BR is basically a breaking point of a page, so a new line essentially. So let's create a paragraph element like this, and let's say hello world, like so. And let's go ahead over to our browser and refresh this, and there we go. It doesn't look any different, but when we view the page source, you can see that we've got the element just in here. You might be thinking, well, why do we even bother putting the p tag around it? Well, again, it comes down to the fact that we're marking this up so it can be interpreted properly by Google when it indexes your website, so it can be looked at properly by the browser, and also so you can target this for styling. We haven't looked at styling yet, but if I get rid of these p tags, there's no way I can specifically target this piece of text because nothing is wrapping it. Think of every tag that you create as a little container that allows you to style it, position it, and access it with JavaScript when you eventually go on to learn JavaScript. So there's our paragraph. Let's take a quick look at another element, which is the BR one I spoke about before. I'm going to say new line. So generally what you would do with these kind of elements is you would keep them all on one line like so. But I'm just going to pull this down just so we can sort of see what's going on here. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to indent this. Now, you wouldn't write your paragraphs like this normally, just so you know. So we're starting a p tag here. We've got a little bit of text, and then we've got a break and a new line. Now, putting things on a new line within your HTML file will not affect them at all. So, for example, if I get rid of this and I said, hello world, new line, let's guess what's going to happen. Well, there isn't a new line because there's no markup here to tell the browser when it renders this file to put this on a new line. But when we return to our previous example, let's just put this back to how it was before. We start a paragraph, we can target this element, we're breaking here, so we're telling that we want it to break, and there we go. So that's the page source. So it's telling us to go down to a new line. So we've created our first HTML file. We've already looked at two HTML elements, two very useful HTML elements that you more than likely use. Perhaps not BR as much, but paragraphs you probably definitely use within a page. So the next thing we're going to look at in the next video is a document layout, and that includes things like the doc type, the head, the body, the title. It might be a little bit overwhelming, but I'll try my best to explain what each one does and the purpose it serves.